How's it going, everybody? I wanted to do my best to try to stay a little bit more consistent on the channel, and figured, I've got a little bit of downtime, and I wanted to talk a little bit about the learning process. I talked about this in the past, but one of the things that I think is really important to understand is I don't care how long you've been doing anything. There's going to be challenges and issues, mistakes, complications that you're going to run into. It's part of the learning process, and so I want to talk a little bit about this. And so I do. I consistently. I've got kids. And I'm consistently teaching, because my youngest son, he wants to get into IT, so I've been teaching him some IT stuff. And so I figured, I've shown this, I've whiteboarded some stuff out for him. He's had some questions on some stuff, and I do kind of a deep dive. And I do, the deep dives are kind of like a CCIE teaching a CCNA, and the CCNA kind of needs the deeper dive, a deep dive explanation where you peel back all the layers of the onion, and you break it all down so that they understand the process. And then, do you have any questions? Does this make sense? What doesn't make sense? Do you have, where could you use more clarity? That type of stuff. So he's been taking to that because it's a breakdown. It's a one-on-one with me and him. So I want to talk a little bit about this because back when I first started in networking, way back in probably 2008, 2009, back when I was really new, I didn't know much about anything. I mean, I knew what an IP address was and what the internet was, but beyond that, anything in between was, just a bunch of magic. So what I want to go over today with you guys is kind of the steps to learning. So similar to what, if you've ever been through an old school INE video, and I reference them because they have a slogan, experts at making you an expert. And I really can't argue with that slogan or ideology, because they are good at what they do. I'll never knock them for that. I use them on a regular basis. The company I work for, we have a INE account. I can log into it with my work email, and I can watch whatever I want. The drawback to it is, ironically, some of the content that I'm trying to learn, they don't have coverage for. So I'm kind of up a creek without a paddle. I become the paddle, so I have to figure out how to learn the material on my own, which is cool. I'm fine with that. One of the things that I've learned over time is how to learn, right? And that's one of the things that I think is really important. So what I'm going to talk about here is kind of the process to it. And I have a reference that I want to show you guys. I once in a while dabble in Brazilian Jiu-jitsu, and I don't have a belt or anything like that. I don't go to a school. I do have a subscription to a online course, if you will, but I really don't have a way of really rolling, if you will, which is what you do in Jiu-jitsu. So I find it a very I'm not a big fan of the striking arts. Is boxing and Muay Thai cool? Yeah, they have their own place. But I think Jiu-jitsu is more. If I was going to go a martial arts way, that would be the direction I would go. Right now, I don't have the time to dive into it. Maybe when I'm older and I'm looking for a way to stay active, and weightlifting isn't where I do it. That's my physical activity. I like to go to the gym and lift weights and stuff like that. And I'll definitely say I do a bodybuilder style workout. But it's one of those things where I do it because I sit behind a desk all day, right? I'm talking to you guys on the computer. So all of those things that I do, whether it's bodybuilding, whether it's jiu-jitsu, whether it's learning a new recipe, or I love to smoke meat. I've got a smoker in my backyard, and I like to take different cuts of meat and put them on the smoker with different seasonings and smoke them in different ways. Do this and do that with it. So a lot of the time, you're going to probably stay in levels 1, 2, and you might get to 3 in some things, but very rarely are you ever going to get to 4. Now, I would say for the most part that I am definitely because I have a route switch CCIE, and I'm coming up on my 10 years here very, very soon. I would definitely say that because of my level of understanding of the routing protocols that I've spent quite a bit of time learning, that I definitely am a very high level 3 and maybe a very low level 4 in a lot of them. Now, would I say I have mastery? Do I know it so well you don't have to think about it? To a certain extent, yes. There are some things that I don't have the understanding on, and there are some things that I wish I knew better, and I have to go back and reference things. So I would say I'm very well versed. Conscious competence is what they refer to it as, and I'll share the link to this so you guys can take a look at it. But one of the things that I'm very cognizant about is you don't know what you don't know. So I've been reading the segment routing for service provider and enterprise now for probably about a month, and I'm slowly working my way through the entire book. So I am very much bouncing between levels 1 and 2, and on a pretty regular basis. Like, I'm learning something new, I'm having to read through stuff and take detailed notes so that, like, am I going to remember a lot of it? Unfortunately, no, I'm not, because I've read and reread and reread and reread. The drawback to that is that you only retain a very small amount of the material that you read, because it's only one sense, right? Because you've got, there's 5 senses that you can apply to something, and the reality of it is I can't taste what I'm doing, right? I can't eat a book. Although if I could eat it and learn that much faster, I would. I can't smell it, but I can touch it to a certain extent, depending on if it's a printed book. I mean, I do have books that I could, but no one's going to eat a book, bro. That's just not realistic. So I can look, listen, and touch. Those are the 3 senses that I can apply. So the more senses you apply to something, they say the faster you're going to grasp and retain the material. I would say that's a pretty accurate. Now, one of the things that I know has worked for me in the past, and I continue to use it today, is I'm an auditory listener, right? I'm a kinesthetic learner, meaning I have to learn by doing. And so if you know that about yourself, and that is how you learn, I was able to retain way more information way quicker by labbing things up. Now, before you can lab something up, you need to know what to do in the lab in order to get it working, right? Which is part of this 1 and 2, where I've been reading this book. Am I labbing much up yet? No, I'm not. I am going through the book systematically. I'm reading it basically cover to cover. I am jumping around a little bit, trying to cover the topics that I have not learned yet, or I don't know as well. So I'm definitely down here in ignorance. I don't know what I don't know. And I'm building that level up, right? That's kind of the purpose. And so my goal here is to do this for the book, read through the book, and then I'm going to go back. And I showed you the topology that I've built for the book, which is a combination of all 3 diagrams that the authors put together. My goal is to go through all of that, lab things out, make sure that my outputs match their outputs, minus maybe some IP addressing, because they only gave so much IP addressing. I'm going to have to make some up on my own. But regardless of how that looks, I'm going to have to spend a little bit of time going through and following the configurations that they did and being like, okay, because then if I can read the book and lab it up at the same time, I'm coming now into more of a level 2 here, where I know a little bit more. I have a general understanding of what's going on, but I'm still probably more level 1. I'm probably 50-50, maybe 60-40, depending on the day. So I'll do that, and as soon as I lab through everything in the book and I have it all stood up, working, and then I add more notes and more configurations and more detail to my notes, the better of an understanding I'm going to get. Now, they say that the best learners are the folks that take the information that they already know and they pass it on to others. So you're basically teaching other people. Well, in my opinion, you really can't be teaching something until you're a level 3 consistently. Because if you're a level 2, like if you're an average level 2, I mean, how much do you really know? So my goal is to get to know about it, but you have to think about it. I think that's a pretty consistent thing. You might have to think what to do depending on the situation, and depending on how often you tap into that area of knowledge and how consistently you're in that area of knowledge. If you're in it all the time, like when you're studying for a CCIE, for example, well, it doesn't even have to be CCIE. Let's say you're studying for your CCNP in service provider, right? There's a lot of stuff for you to remember. So, but if you're consistently going through, and my opinion and approach is when you're studying for the core exam and the concentration exam, you should be trying to, as you're going through all the individual topic areas and trying to build your knowledge level up to be a strong 2 or maybe a weak 3, and trying to build that to be an average 3, as long as you're in this target area, what you should be doing is trying to know how to do all the individual things, right? So you're just compiling information and stacking it. So you get your tool belt is that much stronger, right? So what I often like to refer to this is how Jiu-jitsu works, right? I'll show you a video here in just a second to try to hammer the point home, just so you can see what I'm talking about. But once you've gone through the material and you've labbed it up, you verified it and stuff like that, when you can get to the point where you can configure the solution off the top of your head, and you're also able to add in additional interdependencies, meaning that you're not taking a topology and assigning one feature of that capability and then another feature and another feature, but you're doing them one at a time. When you're doing them one at a time, that's more of a CCNA to CCNP approach. And that's what you should be doing, right, is learn how they all operate and behave one at a time so you can see before and after. That's what I had to do for a route switch. I did that, and then once I had gone through everything, so I'd gone through the videos, I'd gone through the workbooks, and I was like, okay, well, that's where I say I want to say the training wheels are coming off, but now you're trying to build labs and you're trying to add more stuff to this thing. And then you start bolting on more and more complexity to where as you're doing that, you're going to stay in that 2 to 3 on a regular basis until you can get all these things deployed. And then you realize, well, I can't have these 2 things working at the same time. For example, TTL security, and there's something else, and I can't remember off the top of my head because it's been a while. You can't have the 2 working at the same time, and I forget what they are. Like when you can realize you can't have the 2 capabilities working at the same time. It's one or the other. And I just read up on TILFA, topology independent loop free alternate. You can't have node and SRLG, shared risk link group, working at the same time. Now you can put a preference as to which one you want to prefer over the other, but you can't have them in the same preference. That's not going to work. So you have to take that into consideration. So what you would do is you test out them individually. How do they work one at a time? And then if you mess with the indexes, like you change the index on one to be higher than the other, and then you institute the failure and see what the behavior is. That's the only really way to obtain mastery, because now you know what's going on. There's a lot of networking pieces that I am definitely a level 4 on, but I'd say more at the lower end of 4. Know it so well you don't have to think about it, because you can describe something to me and immediately in my brain I know what's going on. I've been doing this long enough to where I don't have to think about it. It pops into my head and I can visualize what's going on, and then I can articulate the details. I did a video the other day about how taking a traditional 3-tier architecture with Nexus and a Nexus dashboard VXLAN fabric and how you would integrate the 2. The only way I know that and how the traffic will flow is because I learned it, I labbed it, I tested it, I recorded videos on it, posted them to YouTube, and then I was rolling out these solutions to customers. So that's a mastery thing. I know what's going to happen before it happens. That's a mastery. Am I a mastery across all things networking? No, I never would say that I am. To me, it's always a consistent learning process. So I'm going to pause real quick, and I'm going to show you, and I'll do a little bit of voice overlay. I'll kind of narrate why I'm not a jiu-jitsu expert, but I'll explain kind of what's going on and why they're doing what they're doing. Okay, so I've got a couple of I got a video here for submissions in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about the mindset and how, so like, one of the things that you'll do is you'll test different things out, right? So you've got the guy on the bottom is moving his hands around. He's got the guy in a triangle. The guy on top knows he's in deep water. He's probably gonna have to do something, and then he tapped right there at the bottom. He tapped underneath his back. So he got tapped. He's kind of upset about it. So in this one here, you've got two ladies rolling around, and both of them are black belts, so they're masters in their craft, right? So what you're doing is you're looking for feedback, right? You're testing something and you're seeing how the other person is going to respond. And so as you're going through this information and you're trying to go back and forth trying to figure out what's going on, you modify what you're doing based off of the received feedback. You're processing the information as you're going along. This guy got him into an arm bar. Again, these guys are black belts, right? So we're like, well, should they never tap? That's not true. Like, they're both. I don't see any stripes, so they're both. They're just a flat black belt. They don't have any stripes, but they could be. And I think it's every 3 years you get a stripe in jiu-jitsu for your black belt. But so this guy's in. He's got a collar choke going on, so the other guy is grabbing his collar across here, and then he pulls, and that's when he tapped it there on the arm or on the leg. Excuse me. So, but you're constantly you're inputting, and you're doing an output by moving something, and then you're doing something with processing the feedback, and you do this consistently. So that's what a jiu-jitsu competition is all about. You're rolling around. There's a lot of respect between these guys. It's you're both at the same level for the most part. Now the guy on the left, he's actually wearing two belts. He's wearing a black belt, but he's also wearing a green and yellow belt, which is supposed to be representative that he's Brazilian and he's representing Brazil. So, and he's got this guy in a really, really bad position. He's got doing a collar choke. And so what you see here is again, it's consistent feedback. You're trying different things. Now he's got a knee on belly, and he's controlling the leg with the hand, and he's past the guard. He's inside control. The guy in blue is in a really bad spot. He's still controlling the pant leg with the hand. So, but it's constant back and forth, right? They're seeing what's going to happen. So now he's going to try to get him a mount on the back. He's got his underhooks in. He's got him in a weird 3/4 rear naked choke. Normally you'd want the other leg to be locked in to control the hip, just like that. So, and then you're waiting, you're doing something. My guess is he's up here in the collar of the gi to try to choke him out. So, and then he tapped. So, but these guys are black belts. Like, they're masters at what they do. So these are some things that, in my opinion, when you're diving into a technology, you're constantly testing things out and the behaviors so that you can do what you need to do in order to figure out how to get to the next step. So that's what I wanted to show you in this video. Now, going back over here to this, it's consistent things like that are going to be what help you get to the next level. So now, there's another term, and I like listening to military podcasts because to me, listening to technical podcasts is like a lecture. And if I can't sit there and do one-track mind, meaning I'm only focusing on this one thing and I'm taking notes while I'm doing it, to me, a technical lecture is kind of a waste of time. I'm not going to retain very much. So, but if I'm listening to a military podcast, especially like special operations, Navy SEALs, Green Berets, Delta Force. That type of stuff fascinates me. And I listen to these guys talk about it, and there's the stories that they tell. I can immediately visualize what they've got going, or at least what I think might have been happening there. So one of the things that they constantly say is, our iron sharpens iron. So the only way you get better is by practicing. And so to me, I'll never equate what I do to being a special force, because to me it's not. It's just so I know more about the technology than somebody else does. And a friend of mine who's a black belt in Jiu-jitsu says the exact same thing. Like, I'm not better than a white belt. I just know more techniques, and I've been doing it longer. You give that same person the same amount of time and effort, and they'll get their black belt in a period of time too, and they'll be able to tap me out. So the thing with growth is there's always going to be a level of discomfort. There's some parts of segment routing, specifically SRV6, that I'm like, I just don't understand it. And that's okay though. I'm hoping that by developing a topology that I can lab it out. And do I need to be an expert in every little detail of SR before I go sit for the SP lab? I mean, I'm going to do my best to try to learn everything about it, so that when I'm in the lab and I get tossed a task to configure XYZ, I'm going to be good to go. So it's one of those things where you do your due diligence, or what you think is your due diligence, to get where you need to be. But it's one of those things where you get to a certain point where you're not sure if you're ready. So you look through the blueprint and you've labbed up all the stuff that you think you can. Like, you've gone through the config guides, you've labbed up everything in the config guides and tested them all out, and you overlay multiple technologies at the same time. So, for example, and I'll be right back. So, in this particular scenario, if I've got CE31 and CE32, right? The goal here would be to get these guys to talk to each other, and CE33 and an inter-ASBPN design, and then CE37 over here that's going to be operating kind of a migration path between interworking gateway, ASBR, SRV6, that type of stuff. So the point here is that you could have multiple things working. Like, you could have layer 2 VPN, layer 3 VPN, a multicast VPN, and you could have a combination of both SRV6, SR, LDP, all working in concert with each other. And if you know how to overlay all the stuff together, that's a really good spot to be in. So there's a lot of details that go into this, but to me, the CCNA to CCIE path is going to be, CCNA to CCNP is going to be a lot of learning. I'd say probably 2/3 of your CCIE journey is going to be to get your CCNP. The other third of it is going to be, and the first 2/3 is going to be learning each and every individual feature or capability of a technology. So you need to know all of them individually. That is my opinion. And then once you've gotten to that point and you know that stack for each one of them, so layer 2 VPN, layer 3 VPN, multicast VPN, QoS, all that stuff that goes along with it, traffic engineering, so on and so forth, you know these stacks, you know how each variable works in each one of those stacks. That to me tells me you're probably a pretty strong CCNP. And then from there, what you're doing is and you've gone through and you've labbed up each stack individually. So you did a layer 2 VPN, then you did a layer 3 VPN, then you multicast VPN, then you did traffic engineering, so on and so forth. So you learn how to do each stack individually, and then once you've gotten your NP, now it's time to collapse all those individual stacks into one topology and get them all working so that there are a lot of interdependencies. This takes routing and switching way beyond what OSPF, EIGRP, and BGP, and a little bit of MPLS, and a little bit of DMVPN I ever touched ever did. So in my opinion, service provider, for just the route switch specific topics, if you take SD-WAN and SDA out of the mix, it's a much more difficult exam because you've got way more things going on. So, and depending on your opinion, you may say, well, that's not necessarily true because you've got, SDA and SD-WAN. And I'd be like, well, yeah, you do. But if you understand a DMVPN, which is part of that process, SD-WAN is DMVPN on steroids. And so SDA is not that challenging. If you understand VXLAN and ACI, there's a lot of similarities. So, but that's just my opinion. But I've never deployed SDA. I've read up on it, so I have a general understanding of how it works. So, but one of the things I will say is depending on which CCIE track you're going after, and not a lot of people are going after CCIE. It's just the reality of it. There's still, I see people regularly passing now, ever since they made SDA more easily approachable with having Catalyst Center as a virtual machine and stuff like that. I still find it to be overly complicated. In my opinion, there should be enterprise infrastructure that I think they need to revamp it. To me, there should be they should change some things up, but that's just my opinion. Anyway, that is what I want to talk about today. I want to go over learning processes and how to approach things and make sure you understand the details, and give you a couple of examples of constant inputs and stuff like that. It doesn't always necessarily tie back to Brazilian Jiu-jitsu or cooking your meal or parenting your children or driving down the road, right? There's always inputs and there's always outputs. You're responding to consistent feedback. So that's what I want to talk about today. With that being said, if you guys have any questions, comments, concerns, feedback, please leave a comment down below, and I'll catch all of you folks in the next one.